Coach was telling you what they're saying in Alabama, and let me tell you, they're saying about the same thing in Tennessee. It doesn't matter if you're going to the gas pump or the cash register at the grocery store. You are paying more for everything. And this is totally because of policies of the Biden administration and changes that he has made since he came into office. You can start with that decision to kill the Keystone Pipeline. And when you look at what the price is for groceries, everything comes in a plastic container. Well, where do you get these containers from? They come from the polymers, they come from the hydrocarbons. So, of course, not only is your logistics cost going up, your container cost, your production cost, and the cost of those food items, the cost to build a house, the cost to run a business. Every cost that you incur from the time your feet hit the floor in the morning to the time you turn that light switch off at night, the cost is going up, and it is all due to the change in policies that the Biden administration has put in place. The Biden administration owns this economy.
Back in 1978, when I was 17 years old, I moved out of home. I had a great family life, but I was pretty independent. That was roughly the time when we started seeing these numbers. This gas price was the difference between me being able to fill my tank or maybe put enough in it to where I can get back and forth to work every other day until I found another source of cash. The president is mistaken in talking about raising taxes. Anybody who thinks that we're going through transitory inflation right now should take a look at what that really means. We're not talking about a couple of quarters of inflation. We're talking about policies that could have that extend into next year and years beyond. And who it hurts the most are kids like me that were struggling to make ends meet, and my parents who were trying to feed 600 hungry kids. The American people need to understand this is the tip of the iceberg. You talk to manufacturers in North Carolina and across this country, they're talking about double and triple digit increases in inputs. They're going to make houses unaffordable. They're going to put the American dream out of reach. And the president is talking about going further with an infrastructure bill that has little to do with infrastructure, with proposals on spending and taxes that are going to make it a lot harder for kids like me who are dealing with the Biden economy. And I hope the president listens and understands the people harmed the most are the ones that he professes to be most concerned about.
Well, good afternoon, and I think that Coach's people have been talking to my people, have been talking to Marcia's people as well. I know I was back in Kansas this weekend, and a $100 bill would not fill my Ford truck with gasoline. And I know there's a lot of other Americans that went to the grocery store this weekend, and they've all been to the Dave Ramsey School of Finance. They went in there with their budget, and they walked home, they filled their refrigerator, and they filled their pantries, and guess what? They were about half full or 3/4 full. Certainly we're starting to fill it. You know, thanks to inflation, COVID is no longer the top of the mountain for Americans' concerns and problems. I too remember the 80s. I remember the inflation of the 80s was the most challenging economic times of my life. I also remember our pre-COVID economy, the greatest economy of my lifetime, thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, thanks to rolling back regulations, thanks to energy independence. It was the greatest economy of our lifetime. And today I look out there and see the social injustices created by the socialist economy and the socialist policies of this administration. And I just want everyone to realize and to emphasize that this inflation is a social injustice. It certainly hurts those who are on the lower income portion more than other folks. It certainly hurts our senior citizens who are on fixed incomes. Folks who have young families, young hardworking Americans are impacted more by inflation than anybody else. And again, I just think at the end of the day, what we're seeing here is a very socialist agenda that's leading to social injustices. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm the ranking member on agriculture, and on that committee we do our best to represent our farmers, our foresters, our ranchers, all of those involved in agriculture. It's so important. Agriculture is such a big part of our states. In Arkansas, it's 25%. It doesn't matter if it's Arkansas or Ohio or wherever, it's a huge part. But when you get into rural America, it's probably 85 or 90%. We're in a situation now where there's two things going on that are really hurting rural America, hurting agriculture. And many of you are from these places. First thing is the potential for the stepped up basis, the inheritance tax. We had a forester testify in committee the other day, the head forester. He said, and I quote, "It would be devastating to the forestry industry." So we've got that going on. We've got the land swap, doing away with that, doubling the capital gains. The list goes on, but these are very, very difficult for our farm community and thus rural America. The other thing that's happened is we worked so hard to get our commodity prices up. We've had our trade issues. We've sorted a lot of those things out. We're getting additional trade issues. Commodity prices have come up for our farmers where they can actually make a living now. That's a good thing. When you look at these prices, especially the energy inputs, fertilizer, the electricity that they use for irrigation and the diesel they use for irrigation, the list goes on. As your input costs go up, you wipe out these increasing commodity prices. So these are serious things. And again, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. The Biden agenda is influencing such that we're causing a significant inflationary period.
So I'm not going to repeat everything that's already been said, but inflation is a huge regressive tax. That's a fact. So the poorest people in America are going to be impacted the most. Secondly, in an area that I care deeply about, energy, that's also something we're seeing a huge increase. Look at the pump, look at energy costs, and that is a completely self-inflicted wound right now by this administration. Why? They're restricting the production of American energy and importing more oil from Russia than ever before. That doesn't make sense. They are making it harder to permit things like pipelines and canceling them and delaying them. That doesn't make sense. And they're even going to Wall Street and saying to our banks, don't invest in the American energy sector, putting pressure on the production of American energy. American energy prices are going to go up because of these policies, and the people who will be hurt the most are the least fortunate Americans. That is a fact. That's happening now, and it needs to change.
So we'll be glad to take any questions, but the bottom line is this. The Biden administration is hurting the poorest families in our country. The people on fixed income, they can't stay up with these price increases. Our poor families, their wages are never going to go up as fast as these price increases. So they're hurting the poorest families in our country. Right now, it's happening all across this country. So be glad to answer any questions anybody has. Yes.
What would you say to the White House argument that these increases in prices are just transitory, that 1 month does not make a trend, and that this is a natural part of the economy's adjustment to reopening?
Right. Well, these are pretty big price increases. We were I was with Jay Powell. He said we wouldn't see inflation of more than 2.5%. This is a lot higher. Look at CPI now, 4.2%. Commodity prices up 16%. It doesn't look like it's very transitory. And by the way, if you look at these numbers from February, so before COVID to now, the numbers are still just this bad. So, you never know what's going to happen. But if you look at all the things that they're doing, whether it's the tax increases, the regulatory reform, all these things are causing prices to go up. And it's going to hurt the poorest families in our country.
Senator, the price of milk went up 9% from 2019 to 2020. Why did that happen? I mean, would you have blamed that on the Trump administration?
I would blame it on reckless government spending. I've been complaining about the risk of inflation since I got up here. I believe excessive government spending, when you run big deficits, when you see the Federal Reserve balance sheet go from $4 to $8 trillion, when you see money supply going up 25%, you're going to see inflation. So all this, but today, this year, already $1.9 trillion, anticipating to spend $7.1 trillion. This will be nothing as compared. I mean, it'll be way worse than this.
You also have to keep in mind that same period of time wages went up, largely due to the Jobs and Tax Cuts Act.
This
Just to kind of just point out. So if you go back and look at the time I was governor of Florida, that's exactly what Senator Tillis said. Is that we started seeing our wages go up, which is the best thing you can see. If you can see all wages go up, not just wages for the rich, it has the biggest impact on our country.
Yeah. So inflation occurs when we have too much cash chasing too few commodities, too few products out there. And this will not be transitory if we keep paying people an extra $300 per week to stay at home. What that's doing is bottling up and creating more shortages. For instance, in the meat marketing program, we have, 75% of the nation's beef processing in Kansas, and we can't get people to come back to work. So that's creating an artificial shortage of beef, which is driving up the price of meat at the grocery store.
Senator Scott.
Yes.
Officer Sicknick's mother just put out a statement saying that not having a January 6th commission to look into exactly what occurred is a slap in the face of all the officers who did their jobs that day. She's asking to meet with Republican senators who are going to vote against the January 6th commission. I believe all 6 of you or 7 of you will. What's your message to Officer Sicknick's mother, and will you meet with her?
Sure. Well, first, I meet with people all the time, and I'm very supportive of law enforcement. I talk to sheriffs and police chiefs all across Florida constantly. I talked to one yesterday. What happened on January 6th is despicable. Everybody needs to be held accountable. The FBI has already arrested, I think, over 400 people. They're holding people accountable. We have 2 committees right now doing a report. We'll get that report in the next, I think, 2 weeks.
I'll take one more question.
Yes, sir.
Spending, is your concern about reckless spending apply to long-term infrastructure? The White House would say long-term investments in the economy aren't going to cause immediate price increases.
Well, I'll invest in infrastructure if it's called roads, bridges, airports, and seaports. I did $85 billion in my 8 years as governor. I think their original so-called infrastructure bill had $115 billion over 10 years for the whole country. It wasn't infrastructure. But the way we did in Florida, we did it where we could cut taxes and reduce our debt. I paid off in the same 8 years a third of the state debt, and we cut taxes 100 times. What they're doing up here is they're saying they want to spend all this money on so-called infrastructure. It's not, and they want to raise taxes. So you can't be, and they want to run up the debt. You can't do that.
So let me add, I think we all would agree that we do need to invest in infrastructure, but it has to be true infrastructure. But there's a way of doing it without adding to the federal debt. It's called repurposing the more than $700 billion of the COVID relief bill that was going to be spent in years 2022 through 2028. So that obviously is not COVID relief. So you've got that pile of money there that we can just repurpose. $700 billion would be a very good down payment on true infrastructure spending.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.